Imagine fighting, bleeding, and even dying for the right to vote, only to be told, a century later, that your voice still doesn't matter. This is not ancient history. This is happening right now in America. For over 100 years, the war against black voters has been waged in silence, hidden behind laws, paperwork, intimidation, and violence. But tonight, we uncover the shocking truth that no one dares to talk about. Stay with me, because by the end of the story, you'll never see America's democracy the same way again. After the Civil War, the United States faced a choice: rebuild freedom or rebuild oppression. In 1870, the 15th Amendment was passed, granting black men the right to vote. For the first time in American history, millions of formerly enslaved people could now step into ballot boxes and demand change. But freedom lasted only for a brief moment. Within months, terror campaigns erupted. The Ku Klux Klan rode through the night, burning churches, lynching community leaders, and destroying voter registration drives. Ballot boxes were stuffed, voters were whipped, and families lived in constant fear. On paper, black men were free. In reality, every step toward the ballot box was a life or death gamble. By the 1890s, Southern states decided terror was enough. They needed laws to make suppression permanent. Mississippi led the charge. Their so-called Mississippi Plan became a blueprint for Jim Crow. It introduced literacy tests, but only for black voters. White voters were either exempt or given ridiculously easy questions. Poll taxes, forcing poor black families to pay just to exercise their rights. Grandfather clauses. If your grandfather couldn't vote, neither could you. And for black Americans, enslaved only decades earlier, this meant automatic exclusion. One hidden fact: white officials sometimes handed black voters tests like, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? Answer it wrong, and you'd be denied your vote. By 1940, less than 3% of eligible black voters in the South were registered. Think about that million silence. Entire generations erased from democracy. Some counties had 0 black voters registered, even though black people made up the majority of the population. This wasn't just politics. It was a war. Families who organized voter drives were hunted down. Leaders were assassinated. Black communities learned a brutal lesson. Voting could cost you your life. Fast forward to the 1950s and 1960s. Black Americans had endured nearly 80 years of silence. But whispers of resistance grew louder. The Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 sparked national outrage. Then came the Selma March in 1965, better known as Bloody Sunday. Peaceful protesters, demanding the right to vote, were beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. The violence was televised worldwide. For the first time, America couldn't hide its hypocrisy. Just months later, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Overnight, barriers like literacy tests and poll taxes were struck down. And for the first time in decades, black voter registration soared. Communities that had been silenced for generations suddenly had a voice again. But the victory was fragile, because while the marches ended in the streets, the backlash was already being written in courtrooms. When brute force failed, America switched tactics. Suppression got new mask, neutral-sounding laws. Voter ID requirements, pitched as common sense. But millions of black voters lacked passports or driver's licenses. Felony disenfranchisement laws, denying voting rights to anyone convicted of certain crimes. But here's the hidden truth. These laws were written to target crimes black people were more likely to be charged with, like minor drug possession. By design, the system funneled millions into prison, then stripped away their voting rights forever. Today, more than 6 million Americans are denied the right to vote because of felony convictions. And black Americans are 4 times more likely to be affected. At the same time, politicians began to redraw voting districts in a process called gerrymandering. The trick? Packing and cracking. Packing, shoving black voters into one district, so their power is limited. Cracking, splitting them across many districts, so their voices never reach majority. It was silent, invisible warfare, and most Americans didn't even notice it was happening. For decades, the Voting Rights Act kept suppression in check. But in 2013, the Supreme Court quietly detonated democracy. In Shelby County versus Holder, the court struck down a key section of the act. The result? States with histories of discrimination no longer needed federal approval to change voting laws. Within hours, states like Texas and North Carolina passed new restrictions. Polling places closed, ID laws tightened, and voter roll purges skyrocketed. It was like opening the floodgates. And once again, Black Americans were the target. In the 2020 election, millions witnessed the modern war on Black voters. In Georgia, Black voters stood in line 8 to 10 hours just to cast a ballot. Meanwhile, white neighborhoods had dozens of machines and almost no wait times. Some states introduced exact match laws, where even a missing hyphen in your name could block your registration. Imagine being denied because your ID says O'Neill, but your voter form says O'Neill. Thousands were purged from voter rolls without notice, often right before elections. Over 1,200 polling places were closed across America between 2012 and 2018, most of them in Black or minority neighborhoods. And here's the kicker, it's all legal. The war didn't end in the 19th century. It didn't end in the 20th. It's still being fought right now. But there's another side to this story, the fight back. Grassroots leaders like Stacey Abrams and organizations like the NAACP have turned suppression into national headlines. Young activists use technology, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube to spread awareness. Entire communities are training voters, fighting purges, and taking suppression cases back to court. Because history has proven one thing: silence is the enemy of freedom. And every time suppression tries to erase Black voices, resistance rises again. You might think, why does this matter to me? Here's the truth. If they can silence one community, they can silence anyone. Voter suppression doesn't stop with Black Americans. It spreads like a virus. Students, the elderly, immigrants, and the poor are all being targeted. The war on Black voters is not just about race. It's about power. And the people in power know that if every voice was heard, America would look very different. For more than 100 years, Black Americans have been forced to fight for the very right that defines democracy, the vote. This war has never ended. It simply wears new masks. But if history shows us anything, it's this: silence is the enemy of freedom. And tonight, we broke that silence together. Now I want you to do two things. Smash that like button and share this video right now. Help expose the truth they don't want the world to hear. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in our journey to uncover the crimes no one else dares to talk about. Because together, we're not just telling history. We're making sure it never repeats itself. We uncovered how America spent over a century quietly dismantling Black voting power, from Reconstruction to the Civil Rights Movement and beyond. But the story didn't stop there. We go deeper, into the shadows where new strategies, new faces, and new weapons were forged to keep Black voices silenced. From prison pipelines to digital algorithms, from gerrymandered maps to hidden laws buried in state constitutions, the suppression machine has never rested. And what you're about to hear may shock you, anger you, and hopefully wake you up. So hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you haven't already, and let's finish what we started, exposing the truth they never wanted you to know. Voting isn't just about ballots. It's about maps. And in America, maps have been weaponized. The word is gerrymandering, the art of redrawing political districts to weaken communities. For Black voters, it's been a silent execution of power. Two tricks dominate: packing, forcing as many Black voters as possible into one district, so their influence is contained; cracking, splitting Black neighborhoods into several districts, so their votes are drowned out by larger white majorities. Take North Carolina's 12th congressional district. At one point, it stretched like a snake for 160 miles, twisting and turning just to capture Black communities while isolating them from broader influence. Courts have occasionally ruled these maps unconstitutional racial gerrymanders. But for every map struck down, a new one emerges, tweaked, repainted, disguised as neutral. Maps don't just draw lines, they draw destinies. And when those lines are rigged, entire generations lose their political future. Next came a darker trick: prison gerrymandering. Here's how it works. Prisoners are counted as residents where they are incarcerated, often rural, white districts, instead of their home communities. The result? Rural counties gain artificial population boosts, giving them more seats, more funding, and more power. Meanwhile, urban black neighborhoods lose representation. Example: a small rural county in New York once gained 7,000 residents overnight because of a massive prison. But here's the catch: those prisoners couldn't vote. They were just numbers on paper, used for power, stripped of voice. Now add felony disenfranchisement, laws preventing former inmates from voting even after release. That means black men are counted as bodies for political advantage, but stripped of their political voice. Once upon a time, chains kept people from freedom. Today, prison bars keep communities from democracy. On the surface, voter ID laws sound fair. Who wouldn't need an ID to vote? But the truth is more sinister. In Texas, for example, a gun license was accepted as valid voter ID, but student ID was rejected. Guess which demographic that affects most? Then came exact match laws. If your name doesn't match across databases perfectly, you can be denied. Deshaun O'Neal versus Deshaun O'Neal? That tiny difference could block your vote. And then the DMV closures. After Alabama introduced strict voter ID laws, it quietly closed many DMV offices in black majority counties, making it harder to even get an ID. Here's the kicker. These laws didn't spread until after 2013, when the Supreme Court gutted a key protection in the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County versus Holder. States were suddenly free to pass restrictions without federal oversight. But the battlefield didn't stay in the streets or in state houses. It moved to a new frontier, the digital world. Suppression went high-tech. In the 2016 election, Russian troll farms targeted black Americans directly. They created fake Facebook pages like Blacktivist and spread disinformation, encouraging black voters to boycott the election. They ran digital ads saying, "Your vote won't count, stay home, it's rigged," or "protest by not voting." And it worked. Millions saw these posts. But here's the hidden truth. It wasn't just foreign actors. Algorithms themselves played a role. Social media platforms spread misinformation faster than verified facts, amplifying lies until they drowned out truth. This is a new literacy test. Instead of asking how many bubbles in bar of soap, the question now is, can you tell what's real on your screen? And while social media plays tricks on your mind, another weapon works quietly in the background: money. Behind the scenes, billionaires and political organizations funnel dark money into voter suppression efforts. Groups like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, draft model bills for stricter ID laws, roll purges, and reduced voting hours. Lawmakers across states then introduce these bills, almost word for word. The narrative? Election integrity. The reality? Cutting turnout in black majority areas. After Barack Obama's elections in 2008 and 2012, when black turnout reached historic highs, dozens of states introduced new restrictive laws. That timing was no coincidence. They call it protecting democracy, but in reality, it's about protecting power. Suppression doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it looks like intimidation. Armed poll watchers showing up in black precincts. Fake robocalls telling voters their information will be used for back taxes or warrants if they show up. Lawsuits tying up black-led voter registration groups in endless legal battles. The tactics may have changed, but the effect is the same. Fear. Fear of voting. Fear of the consequences. Fear of being erased. And so the cycle continues. Old tricks reborn in new clothes. But here's the question, can we break it? If you stayed with me this long, then you already know this truth. Voter suppression is not just about politics. It's about life, dignity, and the legacy of freedom itself. For over a century, America has waged a war against black political power, sometimes with guns, sometimes with laws, sometimes with lines on a map, and sometimes with lies on your phone screen, but always with one goal: silence. Here's my opinion. This silence cannot be broken by politicians alone. It has to be broken by us, by voting in spite of the obstacles, by educating ourselves in our communities, by supporting grassroots movements that fight suppression in courtrooms and on the ground, and by refusing to let history repeat itself again. Every generation has been handed the same test. Will you fight for your voice, or will you give it up? I believe we must fight, not with violence, but with persistence, with truth, with numbers too large to be erased. And this is why I urge you, if the story moved you, if it opened your eyes, do 3 things right now. Like this video so the algorithm can't bury it. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next investigation. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because silence is the enemy, and together, we are breaking it. We are on a journey, you and I, to expose the crimes that no one talks about. And the more we shine a light, the less darkness there's left to hide in.